If you grew up with an alcoholic parent, you've probably asked yourself a million times, why did they choose alcohol over me? Why couldn't they just stop? And why does the effect of this still impact my life today? You are not alone in that. Children of alcoholics, like you and me, often become obsessed with the why because we think that if we just understand it, we'll finally be able to fix it and heal from it. In today's video, I'm going to break down the impacts of having an alcoholic parent and how to start to move forward with your life. I'm Corey. I'm a qualified trauma-informed mind-body practitioner, and I work with adult children of alcoholics to help them move out of survival mode, enjoy life on their terms, and learn that they are enough. And today we are talking about the impact of having an alcoholic parent and why that drives a desperation to really know the why behind our behaviours. Having an alcoholic parent changed me as a person. It's that simple and that complex. It has turned me into someone that I hate, and to be honest, someone that I really admire. And before I go into the impacts of having an alcoholic parent and how that really showed up in my life, I want you to know that I wasn't always aware that having an alcoholic parent caused these problems and issues in my life. I just thought up until I started my own healing journey that there was something wrong with me, like that I was broken and that I was a bad person. It wasn't until I actually started doing the work and taking a lot of time for self-reflection that I really started to understand the links between having an alcoholic parent and certain things I was doing to cope with the pain of that. And that's when I started having these aha moments. But if you are someone who's still in the process of trying to figure out the why behind your behavior that maybe you're not so proud of, and you haven't put the link of it being connected to having an alcoholic parent, that's okay. So for a very long time, I was super angry. This was like the main emotion that I felt all the way through my childhood, teenage years, and through my 20s. I was really angry at the world, and I was really, really angry at my alcoholic parent. So angry that there were times when they were at like the height of their destructiveness that for me in my head, I just thought it would be easier if they were dead. And it's a really hard thing to say that out loud about your own parent. But that was my truth at the time. And that's really how I felt. And feeling like that caused me like a huge amount of guilt and a huge amount of shame, because for a child to think that about their parent, it doesn't feel normal. It's not like a natural thought process that children have about their parents unless they're being caused a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And I felt like if my parent wasn't here anymore, then that was the only way that it was ever going to stop, because up until that point, nothing had ever changed. And for me, it felt like nothing was going to stop the pain and the destructiveness that we were going through on a constant basis unless they were gone forever. So I was so angry growing up. I was really insecure. So having a parent, and you will know this if you are the child of an alcoholic, having a parent who picks something worthless like alcohol over you and your family time and time again really beats on your self-worth and what you view yourself, because you think, I'm clearly not good enough for them to stop drinking, because if they loved me enough, if I was worthy enough, surely they would be able to just stop. Now, as a mature adult, now as someone who's gone through their own healing journey, who fully understands why people now develop addictions, my view is different. But when you're a child, when you're a teenager, when you're an adult, when you're still going through the height of your suffering and you don't have that awareness, of course you're going to think there's something wrong with you, because your parent is meant to be the one who loves you unconditionally. And if they loved you unconditionally, then of course they'd be able to make this choice of stop doing the thing that's causing you so much pain. So the third biggest impact of having an alcoholic parent again links back to the insecurity and the self-esteem and self-worth issues that I had. And I really craved a lot of attention. I was a massive attention seeker. But again, I wasn't aware I was an attention seeker in the moment. And it wasn't just any type of attention. I craved male attention. And I laugh when I say this, but the term daddy issues is very, very relevant and very true, because I obviously didn't get the attention and, in my eyes, the love, and I didn't feel seen by like the main male figure in my life. So I unconsciously was going out and seeking that attention and that validation and that love from any male that would give it to me. And especially like on nights out where there would be a lot of alcohol involved, it was like on like times 10 intensified. And I got myself in a lot of shitty situations, and I got myself in a lot of trouble, and I caused a lot of pain to others because of this behavior, because I would have a boyfriend at the time, but I would be going out looking for all of this other male attention. So I was super emotionally numb. And I developed this emotional numbness because the pain and the anger that I've talked about all was too intense for me to deal with as a child or as a teenager or in my early 20s. And it's not just that it was intense, it was I didn't know how to deal with it. So I would feel anger and all of these like negative emotions, but I would push them away. So I wouldn't allow myself to actually feel them. And you can't choose what emotions you become numb from. So if you become emotionally numb, you're not just emotionally numb from the negative. You start to become numb from the positive. So I luckily wasn't feeling all this pain, but I also wasn't feeling any positive emotions. I wasn't feeling any joy, any happiness, any excitement, any contentment. I was literally just existing. Another big part of having an alcoholic parent, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is the embarrassment that comes with it, because you feel different to other people. And I know I did anyway. I thought I was the only person in the world going through this. And when I was younger, I competitively show jumped. And when we would be going around the country at these different competitions, there would be a lot of alcohol involved. There was a big drinking culture associated with that. And we would often be away for weekends and stuff. So there would be like overnight stays. And these venues always had like a bar. So my alcoholic parent would always end up embarrassing me, always. And I would have children making the other children who would be competing making these comments about my drunk dad. And like I was so embarrassed. And yes, they're just comments and no one thinks twice about saying them. But when you're on the receiving end of that, and when that's about your parent and someone that you love, it's horrible. It's the worst feeling in the world. Like you just literally want to crawl into a ball and be swallowed up by the earth. So I felt a huge amount of embarrassment, a huge amount of shame. And it took me up until a couple of years ago to actually release that and not feel embarrassed about it anymore, and actually be able to openly, like I am now, talk about it, and not feel like I need the ground to swallow me up. And lastly, one of the biggest impacts I had growing up through childhood and teenage years was anxiety. And again, I wasn't aware I had anxiety. Like I didn't have the awareness or the understanding. I didn't even know what anxiety was. So when I was a child, I would have this really bad obsessive thoughts about death. And it's not just like those thoughts where you're like, oh, I don't want to die. I don't want my family to die. I would literally have obsessive compulsive thoughts over and over, to the point where I would make myself so upset that I would just spend hours crying and crying, and it would be thoughts about me dying or my family dying. And it's not until I became older and these obsessive thoughts came back when my anxiety is at its peak, that I was actually able to link the two things together and be like, oh, I wasn't just a weird child who was like weirdly obsessed with death. It was more of an anxiety symptom that I was dealing with at the time. Because now at my age that I am, when I get really anxious or really worked up about something, the first thing I do get are the obsessive compulsive thoughts that I really struggle to break and stop that cycle. So anxiety has been a massive part of my life, and it's completely normal, because growing up in that environment of having an alcoholic parent where you're hyper vigilant all the time, you're constantly on edge because your environment is so unpredictable. And having an alcoholic parent, as you know, well, in my case, like it wasn't always bad. There was like times when they would be normal and not be drunk and not be drinking. And on those times, you're constantly waiting for like the penny to drop, or you're constantly waiting for you to say the wrong thing to like piss them off and cause an explosion, or you're constantly waiting for a family member to say the wrong thing. So it's like you don't even get this break of when they're not drinking because you're constantly just waiting for like the shit to hit the fan again. So going through that over your whole life is bound to cause anxiety. It's just completely normal response to being so overwhelmed and stuck in fight or flight for such a long time. So now that you know how having an alcoholic parent has impacted me, before we start exploring how it's impacted you, and I do want to give you a reflective exercise to do as part of this video, let's understand, why does it actually cause all of these symptoms? Why does having an alcoholic parent cause these characteristics? So having an alcoholic parent impacts your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, and your psychological well-being. It impacts the whole person, and this is why talk therapy can only take you so far on your healing journey, because talk therapy for me was amazing. Like, that was my first step in my healing journey, was going to see a therapist, and just being able to go and actually openly talk about things that I never ever talked about before with someone who would listen and I felt heard and seen by, was so healing. Because up until that point, I never spoke about my parent. I never spoke about the pain. I never spoke about anything that was going on at home. Only ever if I was like really drunk, and then it would all like just literally bubble out and I'd be like an emotional crying mess. But up until that point, I never actually had like a safe space where I could go and just be like, bleh, get it all out. So going to therapy was amazing for me in that sense. But it did come to a point, and I noticed this with all of my clients, that everyone comes to a point in their journey when continuing to talk about the problem and talk about your parent and how much of an arsehole and that they are doesn't serve you anymore, and it doesn't bring you forward. It's very much past focused, whereas it comes a point where you need to start then looking at the future, and you need to start thinking about, how can I bring my body now, because I've got a lot of the crap out of my mind, but how can I bring my body into safety? So yes, talking is a big part, but nervous system regulation is also a massive part. So as you'll know, based off the symptoms that you're dealing with from having an alcoholic parent, it's impacting your full self. So as I mentioned, the unpredictability of the environment that you're in is causing a huge amount of issues in your life. And the reason being, this unpredictability wreaks havoc on your nervous system. So you are constantly stuck in that fight or flight response. Or you could be also stuck in that freeze response or fawn response. It depends on where you are on your nervous system, and it depends how dysregulated you are. So if you're stuck in fight or flight, you're constantly on edge, you're feeling agitated, you're angry, you're reactive, you're very much in that mode where you're ready to either fight or run away. If you're stuck in freeze, you have realized you can't escape from your threat, which could be the alcoholic parent and the environment that you're in. So then you go into freeze, you shut down, you get these depressive symptoms, you feel numb, no motivation or want to do anything. Everything feels like just closed off and really like in your own suffocated bubble. And the fawn response is that you please the other person as a survival response. So you'll pander to them, you'll do what they want you to do as a way of protecting yourself. So not everyone fits into every category. Not everyone will be in fight or flight or freeze or fawn. It really depends on you. And that is why trauma and healing and all of this sort of growth is very subjective to the person and your experience. And trauma is a result of unprocessed overwhelm in the body. So trauma is not necessarily what happened to you. So it could be what I find traumatic, you might not find traumatic. And it may not necessarily be, as I said, the actual experience, but it's how that impacted your body. Did your body get into overwhelm? And was it able to work its way through that overwhelm? If you're getting constantly put into that overwhelmed state and your body is not getting the chance to go through the overwhelmed cycle and come back to a state of balance, that is then how trauma is caused. So another reason why having an alcoholic parent causes all of these characteristics and symptoms is very much linked to the first reason of unpredictability. It's survival. So as I said, your body is stuck in that survival response. And as a result of this, your mind and your body feel unsafe. And if your mind and body feel like an unsafe space, then the automatic response to that is to survive. So you go through your whole childhood stuck into this survival response. And your survival response may be trying to manage your environment and minimize any of the conflict that happens. Being constantly on watch for like the next explosion to happen, or that you turn into sort of acting like the parent. So you become the responsible one. And this forces you as a child to grow up way too quickly. The next one is being exposed to conflict and abuse. And with alcoholism usually comes some form of abuse, whether that is emotional abuse or physical abuse. And again, it's not the same for everyone. But what this abuse does, again, impacts our survival. So we feel like our safety and the safety of our loved ones is under threat. Again, activates the nervous system, activates the sympathetic state, puts us into fight or flight. Again, has a knock-on impact on our mind, on our body, on our behaviors. The next one is emotional immaturity. And I could probably bet my life on it that your alcoholic parent did not know how to manage or express their emotions in a healthy way. We witness this behavior as kids and naturally we replicate it. So if your parents' natural response to any sort of like negative emotion was anger, so if anger was their natural response, then that automatically is most likely going to become your natural response. Or if their response was to avoid the conflict and go into shutdown and just, bury their head in the sand, then that most likely ends up becoming your response. So we carry and we replicate the behaviors of our parent into our own adult lives. And as a result, you don't know how to regulate your emotions. You don't know how to manage conflict in a healthy, mature way. You don't know how to express your emotions. And the last one, which again, there can be many more, but the last one that I have found is neglect. And this could be emotional neglect, physical neglect, whatever that is that your needs don't get met. And in my case, my emotional needs were not met. So it was like emotional neglect for me. And this had a massive, massive impact then as I moved into being an adult. And this often made me feel like inadequate, or as I said, like not good enough. And this, as a result, then makes you feel like you're kind of just independent and you're on your own through life. So you don't need anyone's help. And I feel like this usually leads to the attitude of, I don't need any help, or becoming like a hyper independent adult and not being able to rely on other people to support you in life. Before we start the exercise that I'm going to ask you to do next, let's take a quick look at the characteristics, the general characteristics of adult children of alcoholics. And the great thing is that they usually say we don't usually display one or two of these characteristics. We usually display a full range of them. So yay for us. So the characteristics are guessing at what normal behavior is, having difficulty following through on tasks and projects, lying when it would be just as easy to tell the truth, judge yourself really badly, have difficulty having fun, have difficulty living in the present moment, take yourself very seriously, have trouble with like intimate relationships and romantic partners, overreact to changes that you feel like you have no control over, or wanting to control every aspect of your life and other people's lives, constantly seeking approval or validation or confirmation from other people. And a lot of the times, this is a big one for me, you'll attach your self-worth to external validation. You're extremely loyal, even to people who don't deserve your loyalness. Find it really difficult to like express or regulate your emotion, which often leads to like emotional outbursts, or on the other side of the coin, a lot of emotional shutdown. Living in a state of hypervigilance or anxiety and always feeling like you're on edge. Find it difficult to ask for help and nearly look at it as like a sign of weakness for reaching out to other people for support or help with something. And the last one is finding it really difficult to trust others. So now that we have discussed how having an alcoholic parent has impacted me, and the why it has impacted me, I now want you to pause and take a look at your own life. How has having an alcoholic parent impacted you? What are the emotions? What are the behaviors? What are the symptoms that you're seeing come up in your own life? And if you want, you can pause this video and do the reflection exercise and then come back when you're ready. But the biggest part of your healing journey is going to have been able to have the ability to stop and reflect and understand how your past has impacted you up until now and how that impact is holding you back from moving forward and living the life that you want to live. So take some time now to really reflect. How has having an alcoholic parent shown up in your life up until this point, wherever you are now? So once you've done this reflective exercise, I really hope it's helped you get some clarity on why you might behave the way you behave. Because I know what it's like to really want to understand why the hell you just can't change, or why you're continuously stuck in this loop of negative behaviors, or why you keep messing up your relationship or exploding emotionally. It can be really difficult when you continue to do these patterns over and over again, and it feels like no matter what you do, you can't seem to change it. So knowing the why behind these behaviors and these patterns then empowers you to take action and change things. And as I said through this video, the majority of the reasons why you behave the way you do, or why you've carried through coping mechanisms, all links back to the root of survival. All links back to growing up in that unpredictable environment that caused you overwhelm, that sense that threatened your sense of safety, that threatened the sense of safety for your family and for your loved ones. And you developed these behaviors, you developed these patterns, you developed this way to live your life as a form of survival. And that is just a natural response that your body and mind had. It's not your fault. But now that you have the awareness, as I said, around this, you can do something to change it. I'd love to hear from you. Have you caught yourself obsessing with the why behind your behavior, or trying to really dig deep and understand why your life has gone a certain way but can't really seem to understand it? If you have, I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments. I would love to hear how you changed it, or if you're still stuck in this cycle, what is that like for you? If this video resonated with you, please be sure to like this video, share it with someone that you think might find it useful, and please subscribe to my channel.